Welcome back to episode 178 of the Disorganized Wizards Club podcast. My name is Alex. I'm joined as always by Adam.
Hello.
And Cam.
Hello, hello.
We're a group of Ottawa-based players that play just about anything and everything we can qualify for. We talk about decks, tournament stories, just about anything to help you and ourselves get better at Magic.
Day 100 in quarantine. I'm still out here grinding, playing these magical cards.
Is it actually day 100?
I don't know. I just saw a news article today that said BC got its first COVID cases 100 days ago.
Yeah, when did it? It started in March, right? Our shutdown. So it's been...
Yeah, but it was here before that, right?
Yeah. But the shutdowns of everything. So it's been almost 2 months.
Yeah.
That's pretty much 100 days, right?
March 17th, I think, is when everything officially closed or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, we could figure it out. It was the Friday before we were going to leave for Detroit, so...
Oh, that's true. I kind of blocked that out of my memory because that was such a horrible weekend for me.
Oh, man. Yeah, it was so bad for you. Holy.
The start of my vacation and the whole thing just completely ruined.
Just ruined.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's a lot to look forward to now. Like this weekend, Saturday, May 2nd, DWC Take Our Money coming at you. Signups on MTG Melee are open. Unfortunately, I got the bad news that I got scheduled to work and I will not be able to attend. But Cam and Adam are going to be running an event. They'll be battling $50 US for first place. It's going to be a fun event. I know you guys have been looking forward to it. DWC Take Our Money this Saturday, noon Eastern time.
Yeah. Free money. Come get it if you can.
Yeah. No one successfully took our money last time around. And you all are kidding yourselves if you think it's going to be any different this time.
Hey, to be fair, I scrubbed out last time. You two did well, and you have to work this time, so I don't know.
There's a lot of pressure on your shoulders, though.
Stelly finished second at the last one, so I guess second place is open. I'm going to stay in first.
Yeah, I mean, I played a bit of a brew, got crushed, and then the same brew I played basically won the next DWC tournament. I just suck.
That is true, eh?
You hate to see it. I'm so unlucky. Or bad, your choice.
Yeah.
Dealer's choice.
But beyond that, the event's free to enter. And also, another free event we have coming up, May 17th, the Disorganized Wizards Club Organizational 4 for Ikoria. May 17th, noon Eastern time as well. Free to enter. We have prizes for top 16 this time around. The Wizards Tower has bumped up what they're throwing in for the event. First place, as always, is going to be a booster box. This time around, it's a booster box of Ikoria. We're going to be covering the entire event over on our Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Disorganized Wizards Club. That one I'm really looking forward to. I love covering these events. They're so much fun to run.
Yeah, it's the best. The organizational rules. It's like our major standard tournament for the season. There's so much fun. Pretty good prize on the line this time. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm looking forward to it. It's nice to see them grow, you know?
Yeah, can't stress enough how great of an event it's going to be, and it's free, so there's no excuse to miss it. Sunday, May 17th, the Disorganized Wizards Club Organizational. Signups for both of our events coming up are in the show notes here, and you can find them over on MTG Melee.
Yeah, just to clarify, in case anyone is confused, I think in a past episode, we had mentioned a different date for the organizational, but we had to reschedule. It is now the Sunday, the 17th.
Yeah, due to work conflicts. Nothing we could have done.
Mm-hmm. But the event page is officially live as of now, so you can sign up. All the details are over there. Check it out. The DWC Organizational number 4 coming at you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to expect in that tournament because Standard still feels kind of new. I guess we're going to talk a bit about that today. But yeah, I'm excited even for the Take My Money tournament. The free, come just get our $50 for fun, just a way to play some nice competitive Magic, get some free US cash in hand. But yeah, I don't even know what I'm going to play in Standard. There's a lot of options.
Yeah, I have no idea. I took a bit of a hiatus from Magic and binged a bunch of Factorio the last few days, but I finished that now, so I need to turn my sights on picking a deck for this weekend, and I have no idea what to do.
Well, there has been a bit of a baseline has formed for the format. This past weekend was the first weekly championship for the Magic Fest Online events. The whole thing was taken down by Rakdos Obosh, an aggressive 16 one-drop deck built around, obviously, Obosh, the Prey Piercer, as its companion. And this deck is a little interesting because we've seen Rakdos Obosh decks popping up in the format so far, but this one is a lot more aggressive and features 4 Heraldic Banner, which is not a card that I really thought would see any standard play, to be honest. But
God, no.
this Rakdos deck really takes advantage of it pretty well, too. Ramps them into their Obosh on 5 as well. And like I mentioned, 16 1-drops in this deck. So getting that power boost, pretty beneficial. Also playing Judith, the Scourge Diva, which is a card that we haven't, I think we all thought would see a little bit more standard play than it has gotten since its printing.
For sure. At the beginning of the format in, what was the set last year? What was the set it came out in? Because it was small set standard. In Guilds. I thought that card was going to be just a dominant force. It looked so scary at first, but then it just turned out to be not that impressive. Like, it just hadn't shown up much just due to the power probably of Simic, and it doesn't really fit in Rakdos Sack, right? Previously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mayhem Devil just kind of has outshone it in that 3-drop slot for Rakdos Sack.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mayhem Devil dodging things like Stomp, Shock, which have been popular, I think is a huge deal why it's better than Judith. And just, you can trigger it a lot more easily than just if only your creatures die, because Rakdos like sacks a bunch of things that aren't creatures.
But yeah, this deck has really kind of filled the slot of the aggro deck in the format. Mono Red has pretty much entirely disappeared, and this is what we're left with.
And this is what remains.
Well, Mono Red can't really support a companion, so you got to switch to an aggro deck that can.
Yeah. Across this topic, we had that one Rakdos deck that took first place. There were 3 Teamer Reclamation decks, 1 Jeskai Cycling deck, 1 Gruul Fires deck, 1 Jeskai Fires deck, and 1 Banta Yorion deck. Now,
you want to talk about these lists? You want to break these down, or what, for people, because it's so new?
So let's start with the second place deck, Seth Manfield, Teamer Reclamation. This is a deck I actually played last night in the Wizards Tower Wednesday Night Standard, which I forgot to mention, but wizardstower.com, great sponsor of this podcast and great sponsor of our DWC organizational. Check them out for all your Magic single needs. Pre-orders for Ikoria are up now. But yeah, the Teamer Reclamation deck has been one of the few decks in the format without a companion that has managed to find pretty solid success so far.
Yeah, 3 copies, right? I mean, that's something else. I mean, the pilots playing these decks are pretty heavy hitters, though. But yeah, good sign for the deck.
Looking at the screen right now, Seth Manfield,
Yvonne Flock.
Flock, yeah.
That guy's crazy good. That guy should be a Hall of Famer, for the record.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think he is.
Yeah, he should be, right? His stats are like insane.
Yeah, he's an absolute sicko.
That guy legitimately is so good at Magic, man. I'll never forget watching him play. He won the Pro Tour with Planar Cleansing Control, Sphinx's Revelation, no WinCon.
Yes, yeah, he did.
Oh, man, he played, if you watch that match, if you go back and watch it, he played so well. It's crazy to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he also, I think this is back-to-back Magic Fest Online top 8s for him, too.
Jeez, really?
Yeah, he top 8'd the last one of the previous format with Bant Midrange.
Wow, that's impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does a lot of work.
Yeah,
really good player. Anyway, yeah, the deck, though, is still strong, right? Obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it's got some new toys in Shark Typhoon.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. Stelly's favorite card, I think, in the set.
I love this card. It's so amazing.
It's a card that a lot of people have come to love in the first few days of this format. There's kind of a running joke in our Discord server, which you can get in on if you join. But there's a couple people who changed their name to like a card they like and then cultist. And there's like battling cults of favorite cards. So currently in our Discord server, there's a Teferi cultist and there's also a Sharknado cultist. A friend of ours who just absolutely loves Shark Typhoon. Been playing it a bunch. And it answers it adds a way to answer some of the problems that this deck historically had, which is that it doesn't really have an easy way to get Teferis off the board, but you can cycle through a Teferi and attack it with a shark.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge upgrade. Yeah, but one of the few decks without companion, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Why do you guys think that is? How is it that Teamer Reclamation has been able to find a way to have so much success in the format so far without relying on a companion?
I think it's probably because the deck has such a powerful and sort of explosive game plan that it can kind of ignore the power level that companions have, and it's pretty consistent deck. I think that's probably what it is. I could be wrong.
I feel like, okay, here's my guess. I have no idea. It could be what Adam said. But if we look at the history of Team of Reclamation in past formats, we were talking about this earlier, but generally it sort of starts strong, comes out of the gates fast, and then dies off as people solidify the lists of other decks and then find ways to include answers to Reclamation or find ways to like include sideboard slots. And it could be that currently everyone is so focused on deck building with companions and making sure that they have a deck that is good and can support companions, that they haven't made that second step yet to like also having a companion deck that like is tuned to the meta. And so if everyone's just focusing on building their own deck and making sure their deck functions in a vacuum, that's sort of the meta where Team of Reclamation has thrived in the past.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. Wilderness Reclamation Expansion Explosion is a pretty punishing 1-2 punch if you're playing against decks that aren't really quite there yet or not the most tuned. So you have a pretty solid core that has been proven to be very powerful so far, and really not much of this deck has changed aside from it getting a slightly better mana base and the addition of Shark Typhoon, which answers all, like you mentioned, problems the deck had. So you already are coming to the table with a very tuned, good build of a deck that has existed.
Yeah, it's a safe choice. It's it's powerful,
And yeah, you're going to just punish all of those players who aren't quite there at that level yet with the deck they're bringing to the
my
table,
prediction
right?
is this deck isn't putting up these kind of numbers in a month or so.
Yeah, I'd believe that for sure.
Given that, if history is going to repeat itself, the old meme that Standard's cyclical.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's just a circle.
Oh, yeah.
Everything comes and goes. So at one point, Esper decks were good, and then they were bad, and then they were good.
Yep.
At one point, Mono Red was good, and then it was bad, and then it was good. See? A circle.
Another deck that's been putting up pretty good results in the format so far, a lot of success on Moto, Jeskai Fires, put one copy into this top 8.
There's
Jeskai
kind of
Fires.
two different versions of Jeskai Fires floating around.
Yeah,
At
you
least-
hate to see that.
From what I've seen, there's the like old version that's still just like Sphinx of Foresight, Cavaliers, etc. And then there's like heavier Planeswalker versions as well.
Yeah, this version that made the top 8, 11 Planeswalkers in this deck, and 4 Shark Typhoon.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's like, since you're not using your mana, it's another way to sort of do 3 things per turn, because cycling doesn't count as casting a spell. So you can like cast 2 creatures with fires and then cycle to make a shark.
Yeah. Notably, this deck not playing any copies of Sphinx of Foresight.
No, that's a surprising removal, given the consistency and hype that card has.
Yeah, very few creatures in this deck, actually. Only 8. I think that's really low for Jeskai Fires.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I kind of feel like I don't really want to play fires, but if I were to play fires, I think I would start at something like this with sort of less creatures. Like you still have the nut draws in there, but I like being able to play Narset because it feels really good against the other version of fires and against all the like just mid-range Yorian Crisis piles floating around. So I'd lean towards like a Narset main build if I could. And then if you're playing Narset main, like you don't want as many creatures because misses on Narset's activation. So instead, like your Shark Typhoon can make creatures when you cast your other stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it lets you find your fires more consistently, and yeah, seems pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know which version's actually better, but yeah.
I do know I hate that
has a lot of creatures. This deck has more creatures in it than the other one. Every one of these spells is a shark.
Yeah, I guess if you look at it that way.
Yeah, ECD, that's a 5/5.
Yeah.
Redundant Fires, that's a 4/4.
I
This
guess
is a deck looking to cast Shark Typhoon, not just cycle it.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was just about to say. Out of all the decks in the format, this one is 100% the one that is most likely to actually cast the Shark Typhoon.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and just to make a huge shark.
Yeah, because like the only time you ever cast Shark Typhoon in Team Rec is if you're already like in an unlosable position. And then you're just in garbage time after that.
What's that philosophical idea, Adam, of like 2 opposing things like competing and making some sort of new resolution. Is it Hegelian dialectic?
Yeah, dialectic. Yeah, Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, I mean, fire is the natural like weakness, or has a natural weakness of water. So you've got typhoons and fires together, just making something new.
A song of fire and typhoons.
But speaking of another flavor of fires, Gruel Fires also top 8'd this event. Now this one's a spicy one.
Somebody alert mid-range expert Pete, our former guest on the show, to come talk about all things mid-range, because
is this even a mid-range deck?
I don't know. It's the Fires deck, but I mean, it's pretty hilarious. I mean, it's just like feels like it's just trying to hate out both Wilderness Wreck and other fires, right? It's probably doing a really good job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure.
This is just a meta game deck, right? Like this isn't a deck that you play just day one. This is one of the first decks, it feels like, that's just out there trying to beat the metagame, exactly what you were talking about, Cam, with these Wilderness Wreck decks getting away with murder kind of thing, or Stelly was saying, people haven't really like planned it for it, but this is a deck that did plan for it, so easy top 8, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's not, like if you just showed me this list, it doesn't look like anything I'd come up with, unless, as you were mentioning, there was like specific cards you wanted to play or a specific strategy you wanted to do, and then you've like fleshed out the deck around it, but like playing 3 Quartzwood Crasher in my Arboreal Grazer deck. Just the numbers in this list are really strange. But if it's like something reached after iterations, then I see how you could get to a list like this.
Yeah, well, if you look at the main deck, right, it's super hateful to opposing fires matchups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then its sideboard is just incredibly hateful to Lurrus decks. Because it doesn't probably have to worry about much else. Its control matchups are probably okay. The shifting Ceratops probably does so much work.
And Vivian just being like a card advantage monster.
Yeah, I mean, how much have you played with Vivian recently? Either of you?
I haven't, but
Stelly, have you played with that card a decent amount at all?
No,
It's
I haven't.
Unbelievable.
I did at the start of the format, and then none of the decks I've been playing since have had it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just unbelievable in this deck. I don't know. This deck looks sweet. It's a really metagame deck, but it's pretty cool.
I imagine Vivian is very, very good in this deck, yeah.
Oh, it's just obscene.
It's got to give you similar turns like Shark Typhoon gives that Jeskai Fires list. Like, it's a way to get 3 creatures into play at once and give them all haste, whereas Fires traditionally could only make 2.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the list is really sweet. If you're tired of losing to Fires, I think this deck probably has to have a great Fires matchup, right?
Yeah, you just got all these like Thrashing Brontodons and a Gem Razor and stuff. You just always pick it off. Like they get 1 extra spell out of it. And then they have to like start paying mana while you still have your Fires.
Yeah. And
nothing in your deck dies to Clarion.
Yeah.
That I think is the biggest thing. Like another reason I think Fires is around.
Actually, the Arboreal Grazer dies to Clarion.
I'll accept that.
Hey, maybe you got to block something with it eventually. I don't know.
The Vivian Beasts, those die.
Yeah, but the damage is probably already done.
That's true. Your Kahira dies. But anyway, that's not in the deck. That's in the sideboard. What does Bonder's Enclave do?
Draws cards.
Draw a card only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. It's not a bad mana sink when you have Fires.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if that card would start seeing play. I just think it's a pretty powerful option.
Mm-hmm. Embercleave has found its way into another top 8.
Yeah. Surprise to no one.
I mean, Embercleave has pretty much entirely disappeared. When was the last time you played against one? I can't even remember.
Yeah, it's true. I never see it anymore. But there's no way that card doesn't see play, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. The card's too good to not see any play. But
that card is obscene, yeah.
Maybe this is the deck.
Yeah, it's a little clunky with it, though. I don't even know if Embercleave's what you're looking for, the way the meta shakes up in this deck. Yeah.
You just cast it for 0 with Fires and then equip it.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward sometimes.
Yeah, you could do that. Another deck that I briefly mentioned last week that has really been seeing a lot of players have really picked this deck up on ladder is Cycling. Jeskai Cycling top 8'd this event. Have you guys
this
played
deck
much
is
against
pretty
Cycling?
cool, actually.
Yeah. I hate this deck. I hate it so much.
Why?
It's the most annoying deck to play against
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, I hate it.
There's a lot of APM involved in this deck, even for your opponent, because they just have to click pass turn constantly.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I get myself into a good position against it, then just get flared out, and then the game ends. There's nothing you can do. I just hate everything about it.
Yeah, Zenith Flares. I haven't actually played against it that much, but Zenith Flares got to be like the reason this exists, because most of the deck looks like a really good draft strategy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, yeah, you just like, as long as you do something on the board and they eventually have to put resources into dealing with it, then you just Zenith Flare them out. A friend of ours was talking in Facebook earlier. I guess he'd been playing this list. He said he Zenith Flared his opponent for 17 to win the game.
Yeah. Funny enough, when I started playing against this deck early in the format was when I was playing a lot of Abs and Humans, and Abs and Humans was just naturally pretty good against it because you had all this incidental graveyard hate, so those Zenith Flares were never that big. But it's a lot harder to deal with this deck playing something like Team of Reclamation, I've found.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, strange. It's like, this deck is such like a weird concept that like it's basically block constructed and most of it is commons and it's good in large standard. Like it's rare that there's a deck with commons that are good. Like
This is the freest
still
deck.
talk about Thraben Inspector because it was like one of the rare commons to grace the power levels needed for standard. I wonder if this is like a similar, that like eventually there's ways to answer this that people just aren't exploring right now because everyone's focusing on their own deck, or if this sticks around. But a friend of ours, P. Sams, actually had a good point that like back in his day, the cheapest cycling you could find was 2 mana on some lands and other things cycled for more. And people thought that was really strong. They put a lot of 1 mana cyclers into this set. And that's really what's fueling this deck, is that it's the cheapest cycling cards ever printed.
Yeah, it's really consistent, cheap. Deck probably doesn't have to mulligan.
Yeah, I mean, all of your payoffs also cycle too. So like once you have one, everything else just fuels your payoff.
Yeah, exactly. It just starts to chain off.
Yeah,
I love that tournaments are kind of these massive scale operations now that sort of aren't defined by location, and you get to see. I feel like that helps see more crazy decks like this too. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess like this person's name is, I assume, Japanese, and in the past, people would always like sort of gawk over the like crazy, wacky decks that do well in like small Japanese events, but now they're doing well in the actual events because they're online. There's like no delineation anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So maybe they weren't actually that crazy and wacky and just like a local thing. You too can brew your way to fame.
All right. Rounding out this top 8, Pyotr Gogoski canister with Bant Yorion. This deck.
Yorion. Whew.
Yeah. This deck we've seen in the format so far, this build of the deck, a little more controlling, 4 neutralize, 3 Aether Gust. I like this deck. Bant Yorion, big fan of this strategy. 4 Shark Typhoon, you love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a weird one. Cam was talking about it on the pre-show. This is such a weird thing to even see, this level.
Yeah.
Like 80 cards being played, it just goes against everything you're kind of taught when you play Magic, right?
Yeah, I mean, the common wisdom that everyone knows is like, or one of the things people learn soon when they get into Magic is that like there is only a minimum number of cards allowed in a deck, but everyone sticks to the minimum. And then people ask why. And it's, a consistency thing. Like you want to make sure that your deck does the same stuff every game, and going over dilutes that and makes your deck less consistent, less likely to function or do what you want. So everyone always sticks to 60. And in general, that's true and remains true if you get nothing else for it. Like if you just go over 60 for the sake of adding more cards, like it's not worth it. But the text on Yorion and the effect it gives you in a format where there's a lot of very, very strong things to blink. For instance, a blue-white blink deck existed in the past. So like there's no shortage of targets that Flickering is really strong on. This deck's playing Agent, things like Planeswalkers resetting their loyalty, most of these decks have, this one has Elspeth Conquers Death, or even the Omens. Like, it's like this perfect storm of an effect on a companion and enough strong cards of a certain type to satisfy its deck building constraint that like allows Yorion to function. And it's kind of a feature of how large Standard is. Like, there's only one more set that needs to be added before rotation. If 2 or 3 other sets or recent sets weren't in Standard, like, there would be enough cards to have a acceptable Yorion deck.
Yeah, exactly. It has the same card type essentially, right? A bunch of 2-mana draw cards, Uro Growth Spiral, right? It has sort of neutralized so it can cycle. Like, it has a level of consistency probably only available to it, in big Standard. And yeah, have you been locked yet by the ECD Yorion?
No, not yet.
I've done it to people. It's the best.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point that you mentioned there. Like, if you think of a normal 60-card deck as usually having access to 4 copies of an effect, and then people get really excited and talk about the rule of 8 when it has more than that. Like, for ramp effects in the last format, we were talking about how good like the Cynic ramp or the other ramp strategies were, because in their 60 cards, they had 8 ramp effects. They had Growth Spiral Uro, so that's like amazing. But it's acceptable to have 4 of an effect. And so you've added 20 cards, but you have like Growth Spiral and Omen doing similar things. That's like 8 cards. Uro is also included in there. You could consider that like 12. As far as filtering through your deck, like Narset and Tameo, you have 6 effects like that. So there are enough effects around to make up for the extra cards.
Yeah, exactly. And that's sort of what makes it so powerful and so consistent, I think, despite the 80 cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I can't stress enough how powerful Tameo Collector of Tales is in strategies like this. The Yorion decks really rely on the plus of Tameo to be able to churn through their deck to find the cards they need. It's just so good.
Yeah, Tameo's crazy. And it also kind of lines up against some of the things people are trying to do to you in the format, so...
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Despite all that, like, emotionally, I still can't get over the fact that they're playing more than 60 cards. Every single time they draw something, I tilt off. Like, if I get wrathed by a Yorion deck, I'm like, they're playing 80 cards. There's no way they should be able to find their wrath. That's bullshit.
Dude, I say the same thing to myself every time. I'm like, how does this guy just have it every time?
Like, if they Growth Spiral on 2, I'm like, no way. Like, Shuffler's broken.
So
you gonna go report the Shuffler bug?
But like, of course, they're going to have it on 2 some games. Like, it's still in their deck and they can draw it. But like, I just assume that their deck shouldn't function every time I see a Yorion. And when it does, I get mad.
So last week on stream, I played against a Teamer Flash deck that played Lutri as the companion. So it was Singleton, right? Mm-hmm. And I lost to it because they literally just like countered every spell that mattered to me. And I was just like flipping out on stream. Like, you got to be kidding me. They drew their 1 of Ionized. This bullshit. Like...
But really, it's one of their like 6 counter spells.
Yeah.
But it was funny for me to go through that.
Yeah, and this deck sort of experiences the same thing, right? It seems like it should be inconsistent, but it's really not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, if you just glanced at this deck list quick and like didn't take into account all the numbers on it, like, you wouldn't automatically just assume it's an 80 card deck because there's no like bad cards that jump off the page to you,
Yeah, these are all just banned control cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Yorion, play it while you can, because come rotation in a couple months, I don't think the support will be there. So if you like flickering stuff with your 4/5 flyer, do it now.
Yeah, probably that's a safe bet that in small Standard it won't be as powerful, or alternatively it might just be busted beyond belief because the way companions line up in small set Standard, they're actually so powerful that they push out every other thing. That's actually my concern.
I could see the other companions doing that, but like,
yeah, probably not Yorion.
Yeah, just because like then like in a small Standard, this thing that Stelly mentioned wouldn't be true. Like, you'll tell a Yorion deck because it's got like some unplayable commons in it to fill it out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But not right now.
So yeah, what are you guys thinking about picking up for the DWC Take Our Money event this weekend?
I don't know yet. I can't decide. Probably some Shark Tornado deck.
I currently have no idea. I still have like an irrational love for Vadrock. And since the Take Our Money is kind of a fun tournament, might try and come up with something wacky to play using him.
You mean you're just gonna go into the event knowing that you're just gonna let everybody take our money?
No, I'm not going to play it if it's bad. I'm only going to play it if it's like, okay.
Yeah, that's what I did last time. Lost
Yeah,
instantly.
exactly.
Yeah. So what else has been kind of kicking around in standard besides this top 8? What else have you guys played against? What do you think are sort of decks that didn't top 8 that might have some potential here?
Well, I've run into a lot of more greedy Yorion builds on ladder, 4-color, 5-color Yorion decks. Those have been getting more and more popular. Outside of the decks that are in this top 8, I run into the decks on this top 8 a decent amount outside of the Gruul Fires deck. I've never played against that thing, but the Rakdos aggro decks, Temur Rek, Jeskai Fires, and builds of Cycling are pretty popular at the moment.
Yeah, that's about my experience as well. I've seen lots of wacky different Yorion builds for sure. I've seen some bizarre ones.
I don't run into Luris sacrifice decks that often anymore. Most of the Luris decks I run into now are just the Cycling decks, to be honest.
Yeah, I ran into Luris more a week ago, like all different aggro sacrifice builds. But then playing today, I didn't see any.
Yeah, all the Obosh decks have just kind of filled in that space in the format. And I think Jeskai Fires just preys too much on the Luris sacrifice decks, and that's why we've seen them kind of fall off the map with how popular Fires has gotten.
That makes sense.
But I'm still trying to find the perfect 80-card Yorion deck because I've had a lot of fun playing those strategies. The greedier, the better,
Yeah, oh yeah. I just love the sound of I'm trying to find the perfect 80-card deck. It just seems like that should be such a paradox,
Yeah.
But here we are. Crazy times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like if I really, really wanted to defend our money, I would just play Fires. But I don't really want to inflict that on myself or anyone else, so I'm not sure what I'll do.
Nothing is worth playing Fires.
Yeah, I'm not going to play Fires. Although I've played it in the past. Regretted it every time, but I have done
exactly. Like, I don't want to do that to myself. I don't want to get tricked. Maybe
you've regretted it every time too, haven't you, Cam?
Yeah, every time I play like normal Fires, I regret it. I've played like Planeswalker heavy versions with like no creatures and Sarkons and stuff. That's been okay, but maybe I'll do something like that.
Yeah.
I just want to play Narset, but I don't know where to put her.
Fair. Yeah, Narset's still really strong, I think, right now. I mean, the Yorion decks are playing them too, right?
We're talking 3-mana Narset, right?
Oh, you're talking about 4-mana Narset, yeah.
No, I'm talking 3-mana Narset. Sorry, I forget that there's 2 now. Yeah, part of Reveals, like against all these mid-range, like all the various Yorion lists, like they're all Grosspile or Uro. Most of them have Krasis, or a lot of them have Krasis. It's like good against the ops and stuff out of Team of Reclamation, and then it digs to your answers in other matchups. Like just as long as Narset Part of Veils has been in Standard, I've been a fan, and I think she's still good like she was last format.
Yeah, for sure. I'm tempted to play a Yorion deck only because I love that card. I also love Tamiyo. I was a huge Tamiyo 4 fan when it first came out. Nothing feels like an opponent trying to Thought Erasure you and then Tamiyo flashes red.
Yeah.
It feels
Tamiyo might be my favorite Planeswalker from that set.
Yeah, I love that card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think as like a minor note about Standard, is there any reason not to play Agonizing Remorse main over Thought Erasure? Like, I guess you lose some consistency being unable to surveil, but it exiles things from a lot of these graveyard strategy decks. It gets around Tamiyo.
Yeah, honestly, there just aren't really many decks that are playing Thought Erasure or Agonizing Remorse right now, just in general.
That's what I was trying to do, because I was playing Vadrock lists and just getting smashed by Fires. It was like unwinnable. So I tried to like go 4 colors or maybe Grixis, like to add in discard spells I could flash back. I didn't spend much time on them, but did play against Yorion, and Agonizing Remorse getting around Tamiyo is important.
Yeah. Like the deck that played those cards last format was Sultai midrange, and that deck has pretty much entirely disappeared. It's just gotten a lot worse.
Yeah, yeah, it's so clunky against all these powerful decks that also have Companion. These like fair mid-range decks just get pounded, right?
Mm-hmm. And like there were some builds of Esper Yorion decks floating around a little bit, but those decks aren't very good, so they're pretty much entirely gone. Like I haven't had someone cast a Thought Erasure against me in a long time, to be honest. Now that I'm thinking about it,
for sure.
I mean, it kind of has lost some potency. Like, if you imagine what Thought Erasure used to do, which was take the haymakers from your opponent, like you could take their Nissa, and then they have a couple turns to draw another one. Otherwise, their turn 5 is far less than ideal, and you like have actually disrupted their game plan in a meaningful way. You can't Thought Erasure Yorion, you can't Thought Erasure Loris. Like, you can't actually interact with the haymakers these decks are built around anymore. They always have a good turn when they want to cast their companion. And so like discard is sort of no longer able to hamstring opponents in the same way it used to.
Yeah, even traditional mid-range feels like it gets kind of punished, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Or even like, I was saying discard is good against fires. Is it that good against fires when they can just reload with a Karuga that you can't ever take?
Yeah, right. It looks kind of awkward, like there's a lot of problems with the mid-range decks. I mean, I do want to see Casualties of War back on the menu, but as it stands, it probably is just too clunky with all the low mana costs. Like the mana cost in Standard has decreased so much. I mean, not the Fires decks, but everything else, right? I mean, the Obosh deck that we were talking about.
Yeah, that's actually like, I guess we can talk about it now. This is something that we sort of had on a list as a topic, but I mentioned for the Yorion strategies, and Adam just mentioned it for the Obosh and some of the more aggressive strategies. Some of the patterns you start to see in deck building when formats get larger. It's been a while since we've had a large Standard because it takes about 2 years for it to reach its peak size again, but we're getting there. And it's commonly said that large Standard, or the larger Standard, is the closer it is to older formats. Like it starts to feel like Modern, or it starts to feel like Pioneer, is something you'll start to hear. So we just, I guess, can elaborate now a bit on what that means. And as Adam just mentioned, the average mana costs in most strategies decreases as formats get larger.
Yeah, this is why we see this deck with 16 1-drops and still being able to compete at a power level with these mid-range decks of something like you'd see in the Sultai lists from, a couple weeks ago from last season.
Yeah, like it might be that there's only a 1-drop of playable power level every other set, but when there's that many sets in Standard, like there's enough to pick from. And if you look at decks in Eternal formats like Death Shadow or like Delver decks, like they're all 1 and 2 drops because they have so much history to pick powerful 1 and 2 drops from. So aggro decks get smaller and more efficient as Standard gets larger, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah, and really, like as Standard gets larger, the decks that have the most success are the ones that have the best curve out. Like if you think about the best decks from 8-set Standard over the past couple of years, like last time around it was Vampires. The year before that it was Red Black Aggro. Both these decks, aggressive decks that just have insane curve, right? Like 1 through 4 or 5. Just haymakers at every single spot on the curve.
Oh, yeah.
And this is just kind of how the decks start looking in 8-set Standard as you have all these sets added. And those are the decks that have the most success.
Yeah, you even start seeing decks that take advantage of worse cards, right? This is why you see cards like Whisper Squad and all this, right? Because you start to get like combo enablers and weird interactions that you wouldn't get in small set Standard. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, that last point about like haymakers at every point on the curve and like decks that do the best having the like strongest curve is something also that Adam was mentioning during the pre-show that he noticed, is that like just the velocity of games increases. Like every deck is so much more lethal in large set Standard. Like stumbles get punished faster because everyone's deck is so efficient. And so brewing isn't impossible, but like you have to keep in mind that when Standard is large, like you can't sort of wait around to like some cool interaction that you're brewing around like you could in small set Standard. Like every single thing you do every turn has to be good because you have to be as lethal as opponents they stumble, or else they'll just unstumble and kill you.
Yeah, so like if you're playing and you're trying to improve, this has to affect your early mulligan decisions in big set Standard, right? In smaller set Standard, it feels like you can get away with a lot more. You can keep a lot riskier hands, but in small set or in big set Standard like this, where the power levels increase so much, it feels like you have to be a lot more considerate of your mulligans.
Yeah, the early game's even more impactful than usual in Standard.
Yeah, I don't know. Has that been your experience playing a bunch of Stelly too?
Yeah, I definitely agree there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway people listening, if they're sort of considering playing a lot of these decks is you have to get out on the board and have pressure early. You have to be aggressive. You have to sort of, and not aggressive, but you have to have early plays. You have to be able to interact. Otherwise, you're going to get run over in this format.
Yeah, like the early game is we've talked about this on previous episodes, but the early game is like very, very important in these bigger standards, because if you're not an aggressive deck, what are you doing to be able to make up what you've lost in the early game? Like, how powerful is your top end, right? So if you're not accelerating into that, or you're not doing something in the early parts of your curve, you're not going to have any shot. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess the contrast is like the aggro decks and the creature decks have these like strong plays at every point in their curve, and they have a very strong start. But someone in our Discord earlier mentioned that control decks also like have powerful options. There are so many Wraths in Standard. Through Deafening Clarion, Shadow the Sky, Time Wipe, and those are just in white. There's Wraths in other colors as well. There's various small sweepers in black or red or whatever. Like, if you're going to play a control deck, you need answers as strong as the haymakers your opponents can be throwing out on those early turns, and large set Standard brings that.
yeah, control is always just like it. Well, not always, but over the past couple of years, it's just been just an inherently flawed strategy in Standard. Your answers have never really lined up and been as good as the threats, and the formats have been, I guess, diverse enough that it's hard to hit every deck. And we've kind of seen that over the past year with this Standard, is like the control decks can't really fight the aggro decks while also trying to compete with the huge mana engines of the Reclamation and the Fires decks in the format. And it leaves them in this
I guess I don't mean traditional control so much, because that's kind of just a feature of game design over the last few years in Standard, is that, there isn't really like broad answers that can support control decks. Like, all the answers are kind of narrow and they're weaker than threats have been. But I mean, control style cards, like Fires as a deck wouldn't survive if Clarion wasn't around. Like, you can't play Karuga without a card as powerful as a sweeper at 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point too.
But yeah, more so like I'm talking about in the format right now. Like, I wouldn't be caught dead trying to play a control deck. There is just too huge of a range of decks you could play against.
Yeah, and they each attack you in a different way. Like, obviously the aggro decks attack you by just being quick, but you also have to be able to answer the insane value that these mid-range decks can generate. Like, Crisis has always been a death knell for control decks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Crisis is the killer. I remember when they first printed Crisis. Remember, we were laughing about people trying to play control decks during that time.
Well, we were really laughing at, because green-black mid-range had been a deck before Crisis got printed, and all you did was add blue lands and 4 Crisis and just didn't lose the green-black mirror in like those first few days before people realized.
Yeah, not even close. It wasn't even remotely close. It was laughable. Yeah. And you say the same thing, or you see the same thing now. Sorry. Imagine trying to play a control deck and answering Luris.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so hard. And then you got to deal with Wilderness Wreck. You got to deal with all these other weird decks. Even Sharknado, is so hard. Yeah, there's a lot of things out there trying to like make your life difficult.
Yeah, you really just have to be either abusing big mana in this format or trying to go under everyone and be aggressive.
Yeah, it seems that way. I think I agree. Yeah, it becomes really difficult to manage your resource, manage anything otherwise.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so obviously, I like those strategies will remain good. The big mana strategies, because there's a few cards supporting them, and the aggro strategies. But I feel like there's probably some like very strong synergy decks hiding in this format that haven't been found yet. I guess Cycling is kind of one of them. But if you look at, for instance, something like the final iterations of Jund Food, it took a long time for that deck to get developed. And it's like an extremely synergy-heavy deck that was there the whole time, but just reacting to the format and figuring out, how many pieces it should play, what colors it should be, took a while. And so we're like a week, 2 weeks into a Standard format, so I'm not surprised that like if there is this eventual very powerful synergy style deck in this format that it hasn't been found yet, because that's another feature of older formats is decks relying on combo finishes, which there aren't necessarily like one-shot combos in Standard, but I consider something like Jund Food to be Standard's equivalent of a combo deck.
Yeah, I can see that. That sounds pretty accurate. Yeah, there's probably so many hidden gems and weird brews in this set because there's so many weird mechanics and interactions, companion, cycling, all these things. There's probably so many hidden gems. Like, there's no way we've even seen the end of something like Jund Food, right?
No, like I played against it earlier, which is sort of why it was on my mind.
Yeah.
And that's another feature that I wanted to mention of large standard. Even though, say, something like Jund Food, quote, isn't in this format, like it's not really showing up in the meta, it's not in the top decks, people aren't really playing it, it is still literally in the format. You can still play it. Like those cards are all there. And that means that everything is stronger than Jund Food. So like decks you brew and decks you play now have to be able to beat everything from the last few formats because that's what they're still competing against.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good point. That is how I used to test, actually. Back when I used to test new formats, I used to test them against the tier 1 deck from the old standard.
Yeah.
I always felt like that was a good measure if you were sort of moving the bar. I mean, it's not a perfect measure, but if you test it against the tier 1 decks, I think it's a really good testing measure for new formats, for unknown formats, is to test them against the old tier 1 decks in the same standard.
Yeah, because those ones have had time to be figured out. Like they have tuned main decks, they operate or they function cleanly. And yeah, like especially if there hasn't been a rotation, people could still bring that. So like you need to be able to beat it if you're gonna bring some other deck.
Yeah, exactly.
Now there's some exception there about like perhaps what we thought happened with this green red fires deck. Like if you are building something to specifically attack a certain meta, then like it doesn't have to care about decks that aren't going to be in that meta. But in general, it's a good litmus test.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of, that was a bunch about standard getting like older formats. Older formats still exist. We haven't talked about them in a while, but Companions and Ikoria has made its way to those formats as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I haven't played Modern or Pioneer in a little while. These formats have been shaken up a lot by Companions, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they completely warped the older formats, right? It feels like like this is the best you can do almost. They're so strong.
Yeah, definitely not wrong there. I mean, Pioneer has been interesting. We've seen the Orzhov Auras deck, which was a deck that had existed before, naturally adopted Luris pretty easily and was dominating a lot pretty early on. Burn has become a pretty legitimate strategy in the format as well, also adopting Luris. We've seen the mono-white Devotion decks adopt Eorian and start playing blue for Reflector Mage.
Oh, yeah.
Going a little bit bigger.
Man, you know who first popularized the Black-White Auras deck? Wasn't it Ken Ukehira, the guy who always played like wacky brews and stuff at Pro Tours and stuff? I'm pretty sure that's who it was, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was him.
You'd love to see that. That guy's great.
Yeah, because
awesome.
he top aided the regional PT with the Auras deck.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the one that was in Japan, right?
Oh yeah. That's right. That's right.
I'm pretty sure he lost in the finals.
Yeah, he did. You're right. I'm remembering. Yeah, what a hero.
Yeah, Auras has become very popular in the format. Dimir Inverter of Truth has still been floating around, but that deck a lot less offensive than it felt like it was, early on in Theros Beyond Death Pioneer.
Yeah, that deck felt really, really obnoxious at the beginning. Felt like it was going to kind of ruin the format, but
yeah, it's kind of crazy what happens when you just give formats time to develop and maybe not just jumping on the bandwagon is the correct thing to do each time around. Who would have thought?
I'm pretty sure you're a big proponent there.
Yeah, Lotus Breach has seen a huge resurgence and had a really good weekend last weekend. Won the Pioneer Challenge, top aided the Super Qualifiers. This deck, not really surprising. Lotus Breach had some popularity early on in the regional PTs last season, and then everyone started accounting for it pretty hard, bringing a lot of hate cards in the sideboard. And then, naturally, as formats change, the deck starts to disappear. People start cutting their hate for Lotus Breach, and now it's just been dominating again. It's kind of like what happens with Dredge in Modern.
Yeah, it's sort of going to be this fun police deck.
Just kind of always there, waiting for its moment. Once people start trimming on hate, then it comes back, wins the tournament, and then everyone has to start playing all their hate again.
Just a vicious cycle of abuse.
Yeah, it didn't even Like Lotus Breach hasn't even picked up anything new from Ikoria. It's the same old deck, one sideboard card.
Yeah, it just sort of wants people to be goofing around with companions and doing whatever, right? If they don't have interaction, because it can race.
Yep.
Yeah, that deck is something else. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to play some more Pioneer and Modern over the next coming weeks and see and get some more experience with it, because I want to play some more of it. The format looks pretty interesting right now. I just haven't had a lot of time, and we'll report back. We're mostly spending our time talking about Standard today, but yeah, I mean, there's probably lots of changes in Modern and Pioneer I wish I can spend more time with, or I want to spend more time with soon.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about a format that you'll be able to spend more time with, I don't know if you saw the historic announcements from today, but the next anthology set's coming out May 8th, so I think in a week. And they announced that it's going to be permanent ranked ladder for historic going forward.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah. Also, two of the cards they announced are in the set that are coming out are Ulamog and Phyrexian Obliterator. And when I say Ulamog, I mean the good one.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it wouldn't even be worth noting.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. Historic has turned out to actually be a little more enjoyable than I thought it would be, so it'll be nice to see a permanent ladder.
I like that format, yeah. I had a fun time playing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also Modern. I haven't played any Modern. I haven't really even watched any Modern streams, to be honest. But
done anything with Modern.
Luris has become pretty
Modern
popular.
In a year or two.
Yeah, you refuse. You just won't do it.
Yeah, I've learned.
You've seen enough. I'm going to go through the punishment this week. I'm going to play some Modern. I'll report back just miserable, I'm sure.
But really, all that matters about Modern is that Hardened Scales is back. Someone let Hemsley know. Luris has revitalized the archetype. Mox Opal, who needs it? Hardened Scales is playable again.
Yeah, Modern changing. I mean, I haven't been paying too much attention, but looking at the snapshot of the metagame on Goldfish and seeing a bunch of pictures of Luris headlining decks, seems like it's changed in a similar way as Pioneer and other formats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no surprises there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, rip the Urza. Yeah, people were like pretty concerned that Urza decks would have to be banned, and they've taken a bit of a hit here, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, all the Urza decks now are just Yorion decks.
Yeah. They're following your strategy, Stelly, and all of our strategy here at the DWC, which is just wait around and see if it works out.
Yeah.
In true organizational fashion, you don't ban things. You just wait around and see if it works out.
I wonder if if that strategy, just waiting around and seeing if it works out, has become more viable to moderate older formats now that their design philosophy is to print cards powerful enough for older formats, like frequently in standard sets. Because it's been like every standard set for the last few has like kind of drastically shaken up older formats. Like Oko did it, Companions are doing it. Like they are not as stable as they used to be. And it's almost like a new standard set kind of causes a small rotation. And you don't have to ban as aggressively in rotating formats.
That's true, eh?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Do you think it's a good thing that these older formats have been seeing so much churn with every new set that comes out, though?
Probably not, just because of the cost point. From like a consumer perspective, probably not. I mean, it's so hard to get access to physical cards, and like the Mishra's Baubles, a playset of Mishra's Baubles are $200. Like, I don't know, having your deck treadmilled all the time, just running on the conveyor belt into the bands of Modern into a new format or constantly being shifted, it can be kind of frustrating. But I guess people make the same complaints about Standard. But
yeah, I don't know. It's weird to think about, because if each new set that comes out just doesn't change these old formats at all, then it can get pretty stale. But if it's changing them as drastically as we've been seeing with all these crazy cards they've been printing over the past couple of years, like it's too far in the other direction. So like, how do you find that medium? I don't think it is possible to find that medium if you're just going to keep printing all these crazy cards. But
yeah, I don't think they're trying to find that medium. I think they're leaning into like printing cards strong enough to shake or unique enough to shake up older formats.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way. Kind of feels like they want to.
Yeah, which I mean, whatever reason you think they might be doing that, it has at least led to like some very interesting deck building. And it's a new style of game design, because I remember the common wisdom when I started playing and learning about Magic was that, you know, when looking at spoilers and stuff, we're talking about cards in Standard. It was very, very rare that Modern players had any interest in new packs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Honestly, I never thought I'd see the day where 80 card Modern decks were taking down events, but here we are.
I can't believe it. I actually can't believe this is real life. These 80 card decks, they can't keep getting away with this.
Maybe we've just been thinking about it wrong this whole time, man.
Maybe those 61 card decks weren't memes.
Yeah.
If we had been thinking about it wrong this entire time, then some of these would be 81 card decks, and none of them are.
Fair. I will say, Benoit used to always play 61 cards in Burn.
He's a legendary Burn player around Ottawa. We've talked about him a bunch on the podcast, but he often said that, how many lands did Burn play? I don't know, let's say 20. He said that 20 out of 60 lands was too few, and 21 out of 60 was too many, but 21 out of 61 was perfect. So that's what he'd play. It was a 61 card Burn deck.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, again, addressing all these like conspiracy theorist opinions that like, well, maybe like we shouldn't have been subscribing to the teachings of Big 60 this whole time.
You've just been
like,
brainwashed, man.
The Yorion decks and the not Yorion decks, they're all still playing the minimum number of cards they can. The extra 20 cards is a price you pay for the powerful effect of Yorion, but it doesn't make playing more than the minimum correct. It just ups the minimum.
Yeah, that sounds fine. I mean, yeah, you're not gonna. That's why no one's gonna play 81, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. Thank you all for joining the club this week. Make sure, as always, to check out wizardtower.com for all your Magic single needs. Do not forget, this Saturday, May 2nd, at noon, DWC Take Our Money series is coming to you. Make sure to sign up. It's in the description now. You can find it also on our social media pages. Free event. It's going to be a lot of fun. The guys are going to be battling. And also, May 17th, DWC Ikoria Championship for the organizational. Noon as well. Sign up is free. Wizards Tower is doling out a bunch of credit for the top 8 prizes. First place is going to be a box of Ikoria Layer Behemoths. Going to be covering the whole thing over at twitch.tv/disorganized Wizards Club. So be on the lookout for that. If you want to support the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/DWC Podcast and join our Discord through there. And however you're listening to the show, whether it's Podbean, iTunes, any podcast app, leave a review, rate the podcast, share it with your friends. Everything helps, keeps this thing growing, bring it to new listeners. Thank you for listening. We'll catch y'all next week.
Later.